Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking into something really, really vital for getting through life, psychological resilience.
Mm-hmm.
You hear that term, maybe think it's about bouncing back from huge disasters, like some superpower.
Yeah, people often think that.
But we're going to explore it more as, maybe ordinary magic, the stuff that helps us deal with everyday stress, unexpected problems, and basically keeps our mental well-being,
So, that's a great way to put it. Ordinary magic. It really is less about being superhuman and more about understanding the everyday things, our own strengths, the support we get that make a huge difference in how we cope.
Right.
And our goal today in this deep dive is to really unpack that. What is resilience? Why is it so critical for mental health? And what are those internal resources and external supports that fuel this ordinary magic? We got some really interesting recent research to draw on.
Good. And it should give us some clear insights, hopefully without getting bogged down in jargon.
Exactly. Actionable insights. That's the aim.
Okay, so let's jump right in. This idea of resilience, it's not just about being, tough, is it? It's not some fixed trait you either have or you don't.
No, definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
The research is pretty consistent on this. Resilience is, it's a dynamic process.
Dynamic.
Think of it like learning something new, maybe riding a bike. You don't just suddenly have the skill. You adapt, right?
Mm-hmm.
You practice, find your balance. Maybe you wobble, maybe you fall off.
Been there.
We all have. But you get back on. Resilience is that ongoing ability to adapt positively, specifically when we're facing adversity. CRE studies really point to these two core things. One, you've got to be exposed to some challenge, some adversity.
Right, it doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Exactly. And two, despite that challenge, you manage to adapt in a positive way. You keep going, maybe even grow.
So it's not about having a life free of problems because, let's face it, that's impossible.
Totally impossible.
It's more about how we handle the rough patches. And this ability, this resilience, you said it's key for mental health. How exactly does it protect us?
Well, think of resilience like a buffer, a shield almost. There's this huge umbrella review, looked at data from over 500,000 participants.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, massive. And it showed, adversity does impact resilience development. It had a pooled effect of about 0.25. But here's the interesting part. The factors that protect us against adversity. They had an even stronger positive effect after adversity, around 0.31.
So the protective stuff matters more after the hit.
Seems like it. And even better, interventions specifically designed to promote resilience. They had the biggest impact, a pooled effect of 0.42.
That's really encouraging. It means we're not just, victims of circumstance. We can actually build this buffer.
Precisely. We can actively strengthen our resilience. And doing that helps us navigate stress better, supports positive emotional development, cognitive development, the whole package.
That really shifts the perspective. It's not just what happens to us, but the resources we have inside and out that make the difference. Speaking of big challenges, though, we should probably touch on adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs.
Absolutely. We can't talk about adversity without mentioning ACEs. These are significant, serious hardships in childhood that can unfortunately have really deep, long-lasting negative consequences.
On mental and physical health, right?
Yes, both. The research connects ACEs to a higher risk of things like developmental delays, learning problems, depression, anxiety, but also physical issues later on, diabetes, heart disease, substance abuse problems.
It casts a long shadow.
It really can. And there was one statistic that really stood out. Individuals who'd experienced ACEs were found to be, I think it was 63% less likely to show high resilience compared to those without ACEs.
63%. That's huge. It just highlights how crucial building resilience is, especially for people who've faced those kinds of early difficulties.
Exactly. It underscores the need to understand what builds it.
Okay, so let's dig into that ordinary magic then, those internal strengths. What's first on the list? Maybe how we see ourselves.
Self-esteem. Yes. Self-esteem pops up again and again in the research as just fundamental. It's a key internal resilience factor. Think of it as your sort of internal anchor.
An anchor.
Yeah. Believing in your own worth, having that core sense of value, it helps you weather storms better. You're not totally knocked off course by setbacks. Studies consistently show it's a powerful factor for adolescent well-being, both life satisfaction and mental health.
So it's not about thinking you're perfect, but just having that basic sense of, I'm okay, I have value.
Exactly. It mirrors findings from lots of other work, too. Valuing yourself is protective.
Makes sense. Okay, what about handling our feelings? Emotional regulation? That feels like a big one, too.
Oh, huge. Emotional regulation, basically, the ability to manage your emotions, respond to them effectively, not get swept away by them. That's another critical piece of this internal magic.
Is that linked to self-control?
Very closely. Self-control is often highlighted as a protective factor, too. And research, like meta-analyses, shows pretty clear links, moderate associations, they call them, between using effective emotion regulation strategies and having better mental health.
So it's not about not feeling things.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
It's about having the skills to navigate those feelings, the ups and the downs, in a healthy way. The research really emphasizes its strong, consistent, protective effects for resilience.
Right. Developing those skills seems key. Now, what about looking on the bright side? Optimism. How does that fit in?
That's a good question. Some earlier research had maybe a bit of trouble pinpointing optimism's specific role in resilience using certain methods.
It's okay.
But more recent work is showing it pretty clearly. Optimism, that sort of general positive outlook, expecting good things to happen, is a significant protective factor.
For both life satisfaction and mental health resilience.
Yes, for both. It suggests that genuinely holding on to a belief in a positive future can actually strengthen your ability to cope with difficulties right now. It's like having an internal compass pointing towards hope, maybe.
I like that. An internal compass. It feels like that belief can really pull you through.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting slightly. The research also mentioned behaviors or activities as internal contributors. Physical activity, for instance.
Yes. Moving your body. It's not just good for physical health, though obviously it is. It's also framed as a health behavior that promotes resilience.
How so?
Well, studies show that being physically active contributes to resilience in adolescence. Interestingly, the effect seemed even stronger for boys in one study.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and this fits with broader findings linking physical activity to things like better self-esteem, stronger self-concept, and just general subjective well-being. It's that mind-body connection, really.
Taking care of the body helps the mind. Makes total sense. What about sleep? Another one we know is important, but maybe don't always prioritize.
Sleep is critical. Good sleep hygiene, consistent sleep schedules, winding down properly, that acts as another really important protective factor.
So getting enough sleep helps resilience.
Definitely. Research indicates adolescents who get enough sleep tend to report higher life satisfaction and show stronger mental health resilience.
Is it a one-way street? Or does resilience also help sleep?
That's a great point. It seems to be bidirectional, especially in adolescence. They influence each other. Poor sleep can lower resilience, and lower resilience might make it harder to sleep well when stressed.
Right, a bit of a cycle.
Exactly. Which is why there's also interest in things like school-based sleep education programs, trying to promote healthier habits early on. Prioritizing sleep is actively building those resilience reserves.
Okay, so self-esteem, emotional regulation, optimism, physical activity, sleep. Those are some powerful internal tools. Let's switch focus now to the outside. What external factors help bolster our resilience?
Well, probably the biggest one is social support. Just having supportive relationships, friends, family, mentors, people you can count on.
Connection matters.
Immensely. The umbrella review we mentioned found that the availability of support was a really significant protective factor against adversity. And other studies specifically call out the importance of friendships and peer support, especially during adolescence.
Peers become really key then.
They seem to, yeah. Lots of research confirms the link between social support generally and well-being in kids and teens, and also feeling connected at school is important.
But you mentioned peers specifically.
Yes, one study noted that while family and school staff support are obviously beneficial, their protective effects might become, let's say, slightly less potent in adolescence compared to peer support, as teenagers naturally seek more autonomy.
That makes sense. As you're figuring out who you are, your friends' opinions and support can feel incredibly important.
Exactly. That peer validation and support can be crucial for navigating the social and emotional challenges of that age. The dynamic shift.
Okay. Beyond close relationships, what else? The research mentioned community cohesion.
Right. That sense of belonging, of mutual support within your wider community, your neighborhood, town, etc., that can also contribute to resilience.
How strong is that effect?
Well, the umbrella review found it was a significant factor, but the pooled effect size was a bit smaller compared to things like individual support or interventions. Still, feeling connected to your community provides a kind of wider safety net, which can be valuable.
A safety net. I like that. Are there specific things within a community that act as early resilience assets, especially for kids?
Yeah, research highlights a few things. like experiencing fair treatment, having opportunities to make supportive friends, chances to develop skills, having trusted adults around, not just family, and seeing positive role models.
So positive community experiences early on.
Exactly. They can really lay a strong foundation for resilience later in life.
It seems like these external supports are just as crucial as the internal strengths for building that resilience buffer. Okay, so we know what contributes to it. Are there concrete, evidence-based ways to actively build resilience?
Absolutely. And this is where it gets really practical. The research points to several interventions that work. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is a big one.
CBT, we hear that term a lot.
We do. And the research backs it up for resilience. The Umbrella Review showed CBT interventions had a pooled effect of 0.30 on resilience development. It's also known to be effective in reducing depressive and anxiety symptoms, sometimes linked back to those ACEs we talked about.
Because CBT helps change unhelpful thinking patterns and behaviors, right?
Exactly. It gives you practical tools to manage thoughts and reactions, which directly builds coping skills and resilience.
Okay. What else? Mindfulness seems to be everywhere these days. Does that help?
It does seem to. Mindfulness-based interventions also showed a positive effect on resilience development in that big review, around 0.21.
Lower than CBT, but still significant.
Still significant, yeah. And the benefits seem broad, improving self-perception, well-being, self-regulation, coping skills, general mental health, especially noted in children and adolescents in some studies.
How does mindfulness work in this context?
It's about cultivating that present moment awareness, kind of non-judgmentally, learning to observe your thoughts and feelings without getting totally swept away by them. That skill can be incredibly helpful when you're dealing with stress or difficult emotions, like learning to ride the waves, maybe.
Ride the waves instead of being drowned by them. I get that. Okay, what about broader approaches like in schools? Social emotional learning, SEL.
Yes, SEL programs are really important. These school-based initiatives aim to cultivate both supportive relationships and individual strengths. They often focus on things like teaching self-regulation skills, improving teacher-student relationships, helping kids develop positive self-perception.
Building resilience as part of the school environment.
Exactly. And there's also a growing focus on trauma-sensitive schools, which often use SEL principles to create a really supportive environment for kids who might have experienced trauma, explicitly aiming to build resilience.
That sounds incredibly valuable. Are there things for parents or caregivers too?
Definitely. Caregiver programs are key, interventions that help parents develop their own self-regulation skills and teach them effective ways to socialize emotions with their kids, basically, how to respond supportively to their children's feelings. These have been shown to improve socio-emotional skills and ultimately resilience in the children.
So, supporting the parents helps the kids. Makes sense.
It's a ripple effect. Empowering caregivers strengthens the whole family system.
Okay, one last area, but it feels really crucial. We've talked about all these factors, but life isn't the same for everyone. How does resilience actually vary, depending on age or context or the type of trouble we face?
That's a critical point. Resilience isn't static or uniform. Age matters, for example. Much of the research we touched on looked at early to middle adolescents, say 12 to 14 years old. That's a vulnerable time anyway, lots of changes happening.
And what protects you might change.
Exactly. Something like parental support might be incredibly central in childhood. But as we saw, peer support might gain relative importance in adolescence as autonomy develops. Plus, we know the typical onset ages for different mental health issues vary, which probably interacts with resilience too.
So resilience needs change across the lifespan. What about our environment? Culture, background?
Hugely important. The social environments, the cultural norms we live in, they aren't neutral. They shape how resilience develops and what it even looks like. What works in one culture might not translate directly to another.
Any examples from the research?
Well, one study found interesting differences in adolescent resilience based on gender and ethnicity. For instance, girls sometimes showed lower resilience scores than boys, and some minority ethnic groups actually showed higher resilience compared to white adolescents in that particular sample.
Higher. That's interesting.
It is. It suggests there might be culturally specific mechanisms or community supports that foster adjustment to adversity, things we need to understand better. It also seems that protective factors might sometimes have a stronger benefit for those who faced less severe adversity overall.
Wow. Okay, so context is everything. And finally, does the type of adversity matter? Is overcoming, say, bullying different from overcoming financial hardship in terms of resilience?
It seems so. Different adversities can impact well-being in different ways. That same study, for example, found that bullying was more strongly linked specifically to later mental health problems, whereas something like material deprivation at home was more strongly linked to lower life satisfaction.
So the specific challenge might shape which aspect of well-being is most affected.
And potentially which resilience factors are most needed or most helpful in that specific situation. It's complex.
It definitely sounds complex, but also actually quite hopeful. It's not some magical trait you either have or don't. It sounds much more like a skill set or a toolkit that we can develop.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's dynamic. It's evolving. It's built from that combination of our inner strengths, self-belief, managing emotions, staying hopeful, and those crucial external supports like strong connections and healthy habits.
Ordinary magic.
Ordinary magic. And the really great news, as all this research suggests, is that it's something we can actively cultivate. We can nurture it through things like CBT, mindfulness, building strong relationships. It's not fixed.
So for you listening, as you think about this, about resilience being dynamic, changing with age and context, maybe consider what's one small intentional step you could take today. Something to strengthen either your inner resources, maybe focusing on self-talk, or taking just a minute to practice mindfulness, or perhaps bolstering your external supports, reaching out to a friend, prioritizing sleep tonight, going for that walk.
Yeah, recognizing that what helps you might look different depending on where you are in life right now and what you're facing.
Exactly. So maybe take a moment after this to reflect. Which of these protective factors we talked about resonate most with you right now? And how could you actively, even in a small way, nurture them in your own life? Something to think about.